if you would start with taking the roll, please.
Okay, Neil Butnick,
Here.
Judy Neville. Tom Schulte's absent. Amy Carroll. Here. Todd Lavieri,
Here.
Michael Chin,
Here.
Chris Labrie,
Here.
Victor Alvarez.
Here.
Maria Weingarten. Here. Rob Hummel. Is it
Here.
Hummel's he here?
Yep.
Okay, Colin Dobbin.
Here.
And I assume that Kevin's on his way? Yeah, okay. Our first selectman is coming. All right, so we need a motion to seat Bob Hamill for Tom Schulte.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, we need to add the sewer maintenance reserve fund item to the agenda. So can I have a motion for that?
Moved.
Okay. Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Right.
Todd.
Okay, and then a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, please.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. I can't see. Is the first selectman there?
Not yet. No, he's,
Okay. It's okay if he's on a call. We can skip that item and go right to the budget guidance discussion. We're also going to do an ARPA update. We are going to have a finance update, line item transfers, two things to discuss. We will have a discussion on 220 Elm, but we're going to go to executive session first, have a discussion about that, then come out at the end of this meeting, just to make sure everybody's aware of the agenda. On budget guidance, is Linda there?
Yes.
Linda, do you want to show the slides as we go through them? I'll give a bit of an update, and then we've got a couple of slides to set some context, and then Michael, Chris, and I can also give you an update on our model. Is that okay, Chris and Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So let me know when the slides are up. The first slide.
So the slides are not up, but they are on the tablets.
Okay. Can you show them?
Oh, okay.
Can we show them?
I could get them if you give me 5 minutes. I didn't know we were going to show them up there.
well, then Kevin could go first.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Oh, Kevin. All right. Well, we're going to do the guidance. I didn't think you were there yet, but if you're there, let's go ahead and have you go ahead and give your update, please, and we'll do the guidance.
Sorry to be late. Good evening, everyone. Essentially the same update as last month. The COVID numbers still remain low. We're doing our vaccination clinics for the third dose, and children starting next week with the high school the mass vaccination clinic for the high school. Then the country school is doing a separate clinic, and St. A's is doing a clinic after Thanksgiving. So we're covering every eligible person. Encourage everyone to get vaccinated, and we're still doing the weekly testing at Irwin. This week so far, no children, which is interesting after Halloween.
Yeah, we were waiting, right?
I would tell people not to do karaoke in town. That seems to be a source of problems for us.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, capital projects, essentially, I haven't been focusing on these too much in the past month. We've been working on 220 Elm. The high school roof is done now, I believe. The Playhouse roof is just about done. The CHP projects are moving forward at the town hall, and working on the plan for Lapham, and we are beginning to scope out the high school plan for the budget coming up. And the Eversource, we met with Eversource regarding their 2022 plan for Elm Street, Pine Street, and Grove Street, and of course Aquarian still continues to disturb our roads over at Main Street, but at least we got Lower Main Street repaved. Working on the Playhouse plan, some new developments there that will come for the plan soon, and Waveney House use study is in the works with a target date of finishing in December, and then the police department building project. This Thursday, the building committee is meeting, and then next Monday we have our all boards meeting on Monday night. And as you're aware, cell towers. The Soundview Lane Tower is waiting to get AT&T's antennas on it. The Upper Ponus Bridge tower should be coming very soon. They keep on promising me 2 weeks, but we should get to the siting council by January, February now. And we have other cell towers in the works that are going to be rolled out pretty soon. And then we have a bond offering. Linda mentioned for we have a Moody's call on Friday for the bond offering at the end of the month. And then the thing we primarily have been working on is trying to get the 220 Elm Street building purchase approved and closed by the end of November, early December, at the outside, the end of December. So working on the ARPA funds, and I'll talk about that in the course of the ARPA fund discussion.
Okay.
That's it. Thank
Anything
you.
else?
Nope.
No, anything else? Okay, any questions for the first selectman? I don't see any hands up. Okay, Linda, you ready to go? Thank you, Kevin.
Did you amend the agenda for your
Yes,
reorder?
yes,
Okay.
we did.
We did.
I didn't mention the library.
Tucker, are you,
This is.
Right.
Having to take out the mask, one of the tablets is not working.
I can't follow what Tucker's saying. Are we doing the slides?
There's a technical problem, but we're getting on. You want to
Okay,
go
but-
on or?
If everybody, if everyone has them on
There
their
we go.
tablet.
She's got it.
Okay, great. Okay. Tell me when you're ready there.
You're good.
Yep.
Can you minimize the? Oh, it's right here.
Let me know when they're up, please.
I think we're good.
Okay, so I think everybody knows we've started the guidance preliminary discussions, and I wanted to put some of that guidance work that we'll be doing over the next month or so, and then obviously getting into the budget starting in end of January, February for us at least, into some context. So on this first slide, if you have the first slide up, Linda?
Yes.
Okay, you can see over the last 4 years, we've been able to keep taxes flat, the amount collected from taxation flat for those 4 years. I think everybody on this board knows, and I think people in town generally understand, this is not an easy thing to do. We did 3 things, I think, particularly well. I think this group and the town council and the selectmen working together with all the departments have budgeted very carefully, for starters. We also, at the end of each year, have spent less than we budgeted, and as you also know, collect more than we have budgeted. And that's not just a collection item of the planning around the 98.5%. It's also other areas where we've generally had a little bit more revenue and a little less spending. That's allowed us to have a surplus, because as you also know, we've maintained a rainy day general fund of somewhere between $28 and $32 million over the same period of time because of that dynamic. So look, this has allowed us to keep our taxes flat. One of the guiding principles we're looking at for this year is to try to do it again. This is not going to be easy, I get it, but we're going to work hard to try to keep taxes flat as a guiding principle. And I think that'll be one of our guidance items to look at as we begin this process with the departments. That's not necessarily to mean that everybody's spending is going to be flat, because we know that there'll be increases, but we'll be looking for ways to try to keep the taxes flat as a guidance. Just as one minor detailed item, and we'll get into any questions you might have after I go through this, but we are going to try to work in advance with the Board of Ed and Board of Finance on some guidance in early December, so that we've got some alignment prior to getting the amounts submitted by the Board of Ed to the Selectmen's office in their annual budget, and then over to us in February. So we'll try to do a little more preliminary work than we've been able to do in the last couple of years, largely driven by just so many other priorities as the schools were dealing with COVID. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that along the way, while we've been able to keep our taxes flat, We've steadily been able to reduce our debt. You can see just over the past few years, it's gone from $123 million down to 94 as of, when is that? Is that September, Linda?
Yes, as of October
94 million. So I don't know when it was $94 million, but it's got to be 25 years ago or more. I'm sure it was probably the late 90s or maybe even the 90s. I don't know. It's probably before the big high school project was done. So a long time coming. Again, I think just some good progress. And I think, as everybody knows, we straight line pay off the debts that we have. There is no balloon payment. There's no way to defer expenses. So one of our guiding principles has been to try to keep the amount of new debt equal to the amount of debt we're paying off. Not exactly, but if we keep it in that ballpark, we'll be able to, if not steadily reduce this, at least kind of plateau here, unless we have some real spikes up. And of course, we have some big capital projects. Fourth point I'll make is along the way, we've also funded our education expenses, as you can see. And this is all of our Board of Ed expenses, and Linda can go into some of the details if you have some questions about this slide. And then, of course, lastly, while we've grown that expense, I should say, you can go back to 2009, our operating expense for Board of Ed was 63 million, I think, 64 million. And now you can see that it's approaching 92 million for expense. That is, while the number of students we've been educating has remained flat at about 4,100 students. So a lot of investment in making sure we've got a great school system. And then lastly, we've kept other operating expenses reasonably flat, as you can see here. So I just lay that context out. We all know what the levers are in terms of trying to maintain some steady taxation rate and steady amount raised by taxation. We also have a lot of things that we want to get done, need to get done. So Chris and Michael have built a model. Preliminarily, we've got some assumptions around all of the main levers that we expect to have and work with. And so we go into this kind of well-armed and good experience in terms of the issues, questions, and challenges that we'll likely have and face. But we'll begin the process and cover with a little bit more of that detail with all of you in our December meeting. We weren't quite ready to get you those details just yet because there are just too many variables that we've got to try to get a range around. And then we'll have a discussion in December and provide that information preliminarily to all the departments. And then, as always, work together to try to come to the best answer for the town. So I'll stop there. Chris and Michael, Linda, anything you want to add?
I'll just add perhaps that one of the things that we're trying to do this year, historically we've budgeted budget to budget, looking at increases over previous year's budget and this year's budget. And so one thing that the guidance team is looking at doing this year, and I'm running those numbers and I should have those for you, is looking at actual to actuals comparison, because that provides a more realistic trend of where things are. So with that, currently I'm finalizing projections, which is kind of early to do, but get a sense of what the projections are for this fiscal year that we're in, fiscal year 22, and then build the 23 budget based on historical actuals and projections for this year and use that as a baseline and work from there, as opposed to building it upon the approved budget of this year, which, as we've seen, we spend 98, 99% in any given year. So there are a couple of fixed cost things that we know: the debt service, employee salaries and collective bargaining units, but we also have a good number now trend on turnover. So we can get really close to projections of payroll, which are big ticket items. And we know some of the other fixed items, the transfers to capital and whatnot. So about 80% of our budget are knowns, and therefore it's not easy, but you could have methodology of predicting that. And so I think we'll have a good baseline for building a FY23 budget, and so we'll be presenting that to you once we've met with the guidance team at your next meeting.
Yeah, just to add to what Linda's saying, that's absolutely right. I think what else we're going to look at is 21 actuals, because we have actuals for 2021, and look at what the budget is for 2023, and look at what the 2-year compounded growth rate is. Because we don't have 2022, we could take a projection, but it might not be most accurate. But at least we have 2021 actuals, and look at what the budget is for 2023 and make sure that's a reasonable number off of 2021 actuals as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. Chris?
Well, I would say that one of the salient points is we've been trying to drive towards this actual budget since we started doing this 5 years ago. I think this year we're actually going to get there.
Yeah.
And it's a much more accurate model to use than trying to do budget to budget, where there are numbers that are inflated in there and that we know, in fact, we don't spend all those dollars either on the town side or the Board of Ed side. So this should be a major improvement this year.
So how will you treat ARPA funds?
They're going to be offline, but I was going to mention the other big change, the other big factor to look at is the COVID expenses in the Board of Ed budgets, which are being reimbursed. So it really, you have to normalize those to try to.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Look, I think, Neil, to answer your question, everyone, I don't know if everybody saw the article in the paper today on the horrors that are happening in some other towns around some of the abuses of ARPA funds. We'll get an ARPA update here in a minute. I believe it is our assumption that we're not using any of those expenses in our operating. In other words, or those funds in our operating. So we're not TBD. I don't know that we've heard back from the team yet in terms of how they're going to expect to spend it, but we don't expect it to be an offset to expenses that we would necessarily budget next year for, in other words, right? So, but it's a question that we do have to, sort out. But right now, we're not looking for it to, I'll say, mask or cover expenses in our operating budget. I think we'll budget without it, and those funds will be used for whatever the committees and teams come back with, and we won't really be able to answer that, I don't think, till the end of February when we move the budget.
Okay, good, thank you.
Hey,
Other
Todd.
questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So for the $94 million of debt, we have the police station coming up, and you alluded to this, the library, the new Board of Education offices. Are we going to be moving that much? Are we going to be paying off that much debt so that with the addition of this new debt, we would keep it at 94 million? Or are we taking any extra steps to minimize the amount of debt we incur in the upcoming fiscal year?
I would say, again, I won't set the answer here, but I would say the guidance that we'd like to consider is, one, take advantage of low rates. We don't want to lose this window. Let's not forget that. Well, our balance sheet could handle much more debt if we wanted. So we don't want to miss the opportunity to take advantage of low rates. Having said that, we don't have to issue all of that debt at one time, just because those projects might be simultaneous or concurrent. We can bond 5 million at a time, 10 million at a time. Obviously, by June of July 1st of next year, it's a whole new year, right? So we will stagger it appropriately, but I would say taking advantage of the debt. The reason to have it go down so far is because it affords us the opportunity to actually do some of these things and not even be at the levels we were at, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So all open to discussion, Victor, in terms of how we want to handle it and when we want to handle it. All I would say to you is that are at 94 million or say 90 million next week or next month, whenever, we've got plenty of capacity to borrow all that we have to for those projects and more. It comes also down, don't forget, to the annual debt expense, right? It isn't just the amount of debt. If we get that annual expense up, it's very hard to, keep expenses down if the annual debt expense is rising rapidly. So that's the other variable we'll certainly look at. And we'll model all that debt when it gets released and talk about it with everybody, of course, when we get there. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Yep. Other thoughts or questions on the guidance at this point? So we'll look to bring more details to you in December, but we're off and running, I would just say, and I think we've got a pretty good process, and we will make a couple changes on the actual to get a little bit more granularity to see what's really happening within the numbers, so we can keep it tight.
I do just have one question for Michael and Chris. And this is kind of the first year we have inflation pressures on commodities and stuff. I'm assuming that'll be built in at some level, right?
Yeah, we talked about inflation, and that's going to be a
Okay.
consideration to make sure that that's addressed.
Thank
For
you.
sure.
Our major contracts are settled though.
No, I know that. And I wasn't talking about, I know the employee stuff is pretty fixed. I get that. Stable.
That'll be a question for Tiger when we get there, and as we think about what we ought to be forecasting for whatever commodities we buy, whether it's paving or salt or any of those kinds of things. So for sure.
Yeah.
Any replacement, we know replacement vehicles and so forth are very expensive if we can get them. So
Yeah, and I do think as people are asked to look at their budgets and, perpetual tighten your budget, tighten your budget. It's also, we have to be cognizant of the services that we need to provide. And, you know, some stuff just costs more sometimes.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
National.
And I think as we've all said in the past, and I know the first selectman said this too, the town expects certain services and we expect to deliver them, right? So we know what we need to do and we spend the money to do it, but we don't want to take our eye off the opportunity to continue to try to keep taxes flat. That's all. And I think we'll work on that. Other questions? Comments? Nothing? Okay. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for that. Linda, thank you for putting those slides up. And I guess we'll turn it back right over to you, Michael, and to Kevin and Amy and Maria on the ARPA update.
You want to start, Kevin? You want me to?
So we've been observing what your committee, joint committee is doing with the town council, and we sort of get some of the ideas you have and some of the ones that we perhaps don't agree with. Our plan is to bring a request next Tuesday, the Board of Selectmen will make for special appropriation for maybe 8 items that would be non-controversial. Seems like everybody agrees with. I don't think it's possible to have a grand plan up front because there's a lot of pieces that still have to be worked out. We had a very good meeting yesterday with the Community Foundation and talked to them about how they can survey the needs of the nonprofits, and maybe by January, February, we'll have that input. So with that introduction.
Yeah, and we've kind of Board of Finance Subcommittee and the Subcommittee of Town Council have met a couple of times. First looked at the suggestions that were put forward by the Selectman's Office and taking a look at those, and also putting up other potential ways that it would be potentially positive to deploy these resources, and within the confines of, you know, staying true to the spirit of what the money was provided for, trying to put it into different parameters and buckets, you know, if it's infrastructure, not new stuff, moving it forward if we have it, health and community, business and economic vitality, government, you know, kind of offsetting some of the expenses that we are incurring and will incur. And then again, as Kevin mentioned, had a very good discussion with the Community Foundation to really see if there are nonprofits that didn't get aid or additional fundraising and were really offset in a negative way by COVID. A big focus is we want to know where this money went. We want to do for you know, for real purpose. We want to look back and say, this is what we did with this. And it could be additional pay to the workers in town, which I think people are very supportive of, but stuff that is non-recurring and capital related and benefits the most people in town. And there's, you know, so I think Town Council Subcommittee has kind of a list of stuff that they'd be ready to go with. Some match the selectmen, some don't, but I think there's a lot that we agree on. And a point that was made the other day in our meeting with the Community Fund, you know, we want to move forward on some things kind of rapidly. I know there's a lot of sentiment in terms of the supportive pay, to thank our town workers who worked so hard during COVID for us. But we don't have to do everything. We don't have to identify every single penny right now, so we can be judicious and not make mistakes that other towns have made. And so I think between some thoughts from our joint committee and stuff that's with the selectmen, we can probably work towards deploying this well over the next couple months.
What's the timing? What's your expectation on the first wave of any funding? Would it be in December? Would it be January?
Yeah. Again, I plan next Tuesday to have a slate of initial items. I was thinking 6, now we're up to 8, and to have those brought to you as recommendations for the December meeting and town council approval in December.
Okay. And Linda, I don't know if you can hear me. Is there a special account for governance and for oversight for this, so that we track and can account for this? Call it 6 months from now, a year from now, there'd be 2 years of this process running.
Yes, we set them up in a special grant fund, and that's actually a recommendation of the auditors that we don't commingle them with the general fund. So they'll be spent entirely from the grant fund.
Okay. And what's your plan, to do monthly updates to this board or quarterly? What's the best way to kind of make sure there's I guess we'll be voting on it. Is that the expectation? We'd be voting on this as the proposals come through and get voted on, Amy and Kevin and Maria, is that?
Well, if we follow the same parameters we do with the regular budget, it would be introduced from selectmen, I guess at our board, we
Yeah.
can add to it, you know,
Okay.
in the way the town council can, so that this way we can kind of incorporate everybody's views.
Okay.
And then town council then has the final say, obviously.
Gotcha.
So the
Okay.
selectmen are the most influential in the process, right? Because they're the gatekeepers.
Yeah, but I think the idea of having the joint meeting with Board of Finance and Town Council is that other voices get
Well,
put in.
Well, like the town council were elected.
Mhm.
And I think the
I
sense is.
think that counts. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
But,
good.
You know, certainly, I look at this in terms of the annual budget as needs, and we often debate, is this a nice to have or a need? These are, for the most part, needs when it comes to people who were harmed by COVID, we have to try to identify those.
Right.
The town wasn't necessarily harmed that much by COVID because but on the other hand, there's a lot of nice to haves that we could improve the town.
Okay.
Of how it was,
In the spirit,
in the
right.
spirit of how it was,
Right.
was given. But I mean, I'm not saying that the Board of Finance comes out of the blue. I'm saying that we have some thought process from town council that, you know, for some reason they don't make your agenda, it can be considered.
Is there a deadline to,
3 years,
and is that spent within 3 years or identified?
spent and identified and spent. Yeah,
3
committed.
years from,
June,
June 30th, maybe.
yeah, June.
2020.
It's what,
so, I mean, I know we want to be expeditious.
I think
but-
we,
but
we
hold some,
we probably ought to have 3 waves, you know, this first wave in December, another wave in March, and another wave in June, perhaps next year, because there's some of them we have to work on.
That makes sense.
well, the second wave of funding, we don't get,
Submitted theirs.
right? We don't get the second wave of funding until June of next year. So I guess we'd have the plans ready to go. Okay. All right. Well, that's great. Anybody else have any more questions on that? That's helpful. No, we're good? Okay. Okay, Linda, back to you then on the, let's do the financial update, the line item and the line item transfers and the sewer transfer, please.
So I did share with you the financial picture where we are year to date. October, everything is trending the way that we would anticipate it to. Our tax collections are just at 55%, which is consistent with trend. I think as we've had discussions before, our conveyance fees is the number that we've been tracking year to date as of October. We're at about a little over $1 million on a budget of 1.1.
That's amazing.
So 3 months in, we've already achieved 93% of
There you
the
go.
target. So I think the projection for the year is rather looking positive, and I think it will more than make up any additional losses that we incur in any of the other revenues. We are also beginning to receive some COVID reimbursements for expenses. They're kind of catching up. And so they're starting to trickle in. I believe in the past 2 months, we've received almost about 150,000 in miscellaneous reimbursements for COVID-related expenses that we had already incurred. And so this is just funding that is reimbursing us. So it's adding to the revenues in the general fund because the expenses were already incurred last year. On the expenditure side, we are, you know, as we would be total expenses so far, we're at a total of 28% with a couple of one-time transfers already completed. The transfers for the debt service is done. The transfers for tax-supported capital is done, and all the other ones are transferred according to schedule. But there's really nothing that stands out on the expenditure side. I think the real story is on the revenues. Building permits is actually doing well. We're at over $500,000 already on an $830,000 budget. We had conservatively budgeted this year, but building activity is beginning to pick up. And so I think between those and conveyance, we're doing well. On the other revenues, if you recall at the very beginning, when we approved the FY '22 budget, the state had not approved their state budget. In the latest proposal that we had at the time from the governor, we did not have any pilot funding designated for the town. They were going back and forth on how they were going to allocate for that. So it was out and we didn't budget for it. After we approved our budget, it was included, and therefore that's about 100 and almost 200,000 in revenues for payment in lieu of taxes that we hadn't otherwise budgeted for, but have since been approved. And so we'll be receiving that as well. And that's again, a function of that conservative budgeting, not planning for things that we don't yet know. And so that's, so I think on the revenue side, we'll be fine. And on the expenditure side, we should be fine. Last year, we had a series of one-time expenses. We did the 1.5 transfer for non-lapsing for the Board of Ed. We did 1.9 million for their internal service transfers. We're not going to have any of those. We're not going to have any of those unbudgeted COVID expenses this year to the extent that we had last year. So we should be on track to coming in within the 98% expense and within over collecting as we've done. And so this also factors into that projection that we're doing for next year's budget. And so I think that we'll be sitting pretty in a good position as we begin FY '23 budget development.
Linda, in the parking permits, fees and tickets, that's all bunched together, and it could be deeper in here. Do we know how much our parking pass revenues are?
I'm
just curious.
We have a line.
We had to pay, we're back in, so.
60%,
What was that?
60% of last year, or free
Yeah.
COVID?
Not of
roughly,
last year,
yes.
meant go back like 2000. I mean, last year was in SIPO, right?
18-19 was your best benchmark.
18-19 was the full year, correct? I'll have to check. I don't know. the
Okay, I'm just curious. Okay, thanks.
But we do have a line item. I couldn't find our page that shows where we are compared to last year.
Yeah.
Other questions for Linda?
That's great.
Yeah, so far so good.
It's really a great position to be in.
We have no problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good. Well, if the play works and we can over collect and underspend, we should be able to, we should be in a good position at the end of the year for the next year's budget. Okay, Linda, you want to?
300,000 in parking permit revenues so far.
Okay,
300?
300,000 and we had budgeted 650.
that, because people, I would tell you, people are just getting you have to get to work. I mean,
Yeah.
I found out yesterday, it's like 3 days a week starting next week. It's like, where'd that come from? And they're just like, people are just really pushing people to get back in. So you're going to have to buy your ticket.
We're paying boxcar as you go.
Well, you could do that too.
Exactly.
If there's nothing else for Linda, we can move over to the line item transfers.
There's just a couple, and these are just FYI review line item transfers. There's nothing for your approval. This is just moving funds between line items within departmental budgets.
Any questions on those? Okay, all right. So do you want to have Tiger do the update on the 90,000, Linda?
I can speak to it, but.
Okay.
Tiger is on.
He's on, but okay, why don't you go forward and then Tiger, if we have any questions.
Sure. So, so Tiger can speak to the specifics. I'll just speak to the funding. This is a special appropriation request. This is actually in the sewer fund, so it's not tax dollars. And it's appropriating using the sewer reserve, which is at 3.7 million. And of that, we're asking to spend 90,000 of that on these unforeseen expenses. And Tiger can speak more to that.
Tiger, do you want to give a little context? Maybe just give us the background on this one.
Sure. We had a couple recent events. One flooding event, during Ida and a couple of other storms that caused us some problems. And then we had an electrical problem at one of our pump stations that caused some issues as well. Jim Rogers has been running our plant for 30 years. He's never come to me and say, I'm nervous. And yesterday he came to me and said, I'm nervous. So I have to pay attention at that point. And he said that the pumps that we ordered, we replace a couple of pumps every year. Just to give you an idea, we have 3 pump stations, 2 pumps at each station, 6 at the pump stations. And then we have 3 pump stations at the plant. 2 pumps in each station, 6 pumps. We normally leave 1 on the shelf or 2 on the shelf, so in case 1 goes down, we can replace it. The station can run on 1 pump, but then eventually it'll be caused to burn out. When we had the recent hurricane, one of our stations ran continuously, or I should say all of them ran continuously, and we wound up losing 2 pumps there. And then we had an electrical problem whereby 1 starter motor stayed in the open position, and it wound up burning out one of our pumps. We replaced both starters in that situation. We shouldn't have that issue again, but based upon the fact that we normally get our pumps after we order in about 4 to 6 weeks, they're telling us it's a 20 to 26 week lead time.
Wow.
So at that point in time, saying we need to put everything on the shelf that we can, so that if we do have a problem, we can just go to the shelf, pull it off the shelf, and use it. So that's the reason for the request. Normally, we just, like I said, we've never had this problem. Jimmy says in 20 years, we've never had a problem getting the pumps. We've never had an issue with it, but now I'm not hearing it just for this, but the doors at the Waveney House for the ADA upgrades, 26-week lead time on those doors, things of that nature. There's no water main pipe out because all the utilities have bought up all the water main pipes. So we need 150 feet for one project that we need to do, and we're gonna have to buy it from the utility, things of that nature. So we're looking at material shortages, and we want to try to get ahead of it. We bid these projects or these purchases in June. They're willing to hold their pricing through December 15 if we order, and then we can get them. We can at least get in line to get them when they're available. So that's the main reason for it.
Any questions from the board? Seems pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
so these are the pumps that pump the sewage out of New Canaan?
They take it from certain areas and then pump it to our station. So Old Stanford Road, next to the Bristow Bird Sanctuary, we have a station there that pumps up the hill, up Bank Street or Old Stanford Road to South Avenue, and then it feeds with gravity to the plant. We have one at Mead Park. You might not necessarily see it. It's on the right-hand side as you pull in. It's a big little stone structure that, again, pumps it up Mead Street, and then it'll flow by gravity back down. And then we have one in the Butler Lane area at Butler Lane as well. Same exact thing. Pump it up to a certain elevation and then allow it to flow by gravity back to the plant.
You know where the plant is, Victor, that we have behind the transfer station?
Yeah, I've seen the plant from the road. Yeah, no, this seems like very important.
Oh, it's huge. Very witty.
Yeah.
Tiger, refresh our memories. Are there 3? I'm trying to remember the backup pumps.
We have right now, we've got 1 pump each on the shelf, and one new and 1 rebuilt on the shelf for each station, for the stations, and then 1 for what we call the scum pumps, which are the ones at the plant itself. We're looking to replace 2 of each instantaneously, take 1 of each, put it on the shelf, and then bury because they're not worthy at time. We normally take them apart, use any parts that we can, the impellers, other things of that nature. One of the pumps that got burnt out due to the starters, we had it analyzed and it came back and said, you need to trash it. So some will go straight into the garbage after we've taken everything, harvested everything we can. And then a couple of others will go back on the shelf to help us.
Are these all fungible? In other words, can you use one for the other, or are they separate?
The pump station pumps are interchangeable and the scum pumps are interchangeable. That's why you're looking at 2 different types of pumps. We're looking at a Vaughn submersible for our scum pumps, and then the KSBs are at our pump stations. So the 2 separate types of pumps, but they can be used at any of the stations. That was one of the design parameters when we redid the plant, was to be able to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tiger?
6,000.
15 each.
If not, we can have a motion to approve the transfer.
It's a special appropriation.
Special
And
appropriation.
it's a transfer within the fund, right? I mean, it looks, it's a
Special
transfer
appropriation
within, yeah,
balance.
all right.
It's both, I guess. So the special appropriation, thanks, Linda, the $90,000.
Out of the sewer maintenance reserve fund, correct?
Yes, that's the source of funding.
All right.
I would
Yeah.
gladly support.
So
Motion?
moved.
So moved. Chris, second, looks like Amy. In favor?
All of us.
Thank you. Thank you,
So
John.
is none? Okay.
Thank you.
Tiger, just one other follow-up question though. Are there any other things like this that are, I'll call them single points of failure that we ought to do some preventive purchasing for? I mean, you don't have to have the answer today, but I'm sure you're thinking about this. Maybe it's something we talk about in December if they're.
Yeah, we are thinking about that across the board. I
If
did
it's
have
gonna
a
take
long-
6 months to get something, we just can't be in that situation. I mean, so.
Correct. I did have that discussion with Jim and said, Jim, this is the question I'm going to get. Is there anything else that we need?
Yeah.
And he said, no. What we are doing within budget is we're actually pre-purchasing some
Right.
of our chemicals whereby we might get quarterly deliveries. We're taking them all now, right?
Okay.
Things of that nature within budget, but we are looking across the board at other areas as well.
Okay, that's good.
And this would be across all departments, right, Tiger?
Across, yes, across all departments. That's correct.
Excellent. Okay, let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then I do need a motion to move into executive session and
Don't you think we should? I mean,
yes, Judy should
Yeah.
read the resolution and we'll take a vote.
All right, hold on. I mean, are we back in? Did we go back in?
Tucker, are you back
Okay,
at 8:24?
all right, now who voted? I'm sorry, but who voted to go? No, that was to leave, but do we have to vote to go back into? Okay, all right, we're good, all right.
So Judy, I'd like you to read the, if you wouldn't mind reading the resolution, please, and then we'll have a motion to approve.
All right, the resolution authorizing an appropriation of $6,950,000 for the 220 Elm Street 2021 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $2,750,000. And a motion.
Motion to approve. Please, someone?
No.
Michael Chen, second. Neil, all in favor of the resolution?
Before you,
Say aye. Oh,
Todd, before you do it, I think you got to clarify, since the public is just seeing the resolution without the broader picture, that,
Do you want me to read more?
no, this
Okay.
represents a purchase price to Bankwell of $6.1 million, plus a budget of $750,000 for renovation expenses for the Board of Ed, plus $100,000 for deal expenses, expenses of buying the building. But we're immediately, so the net cost to the town of buying the building alone is under $2 million. And we're going to condominiumize the building, and immediately after the purchase, we're going to have two other investors buy the other 46% of the building. So it's not that we're buying a building for 6.9 and owning the whole building. So,
It's like we close and then simultaneously we close same day, right?
right, well, next day.
yeah, good clarification. This committee's gone through the numbers. The CFO has gone through the numbers. It's a very good deal for the town. And this also is subject to approval by the town council
Town council and the Board of Education
and the Board of Education. Thank you.
PNC. for
and
the-
a P and Z 824 report.
Okay. Okay, that's the backdrop. So we have a first and a second. Can I have a vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, so moved. I don't believe there is any, Linda, anything else? Any other business?
No, we've covered everything.
Okay, all right. Well, then if that's the case, we can have a motion to adjourn.
All right, who's moving?
So moved. Second? Yep. Amy moved, Neil second. And all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I